I'm happy to present the results of the first Circularity Gap Report for Denmark. Let me first start off by saying that this report has been done in collaboration with a group of fantastic organizations. We're really proud of the collaboration and the results of the report. I'm really happy to present some of the key results with you today. Let's start off with the big question. How circular is Denmark? We've measured that Denmark is 4% circular. Now that's below the global average of 7.2, but actually quite on par with its neighbors of Norway at 2.4% circular and Sweden at 3.4% circular. I'm excited to explain a little bit what's behind this metric, but ultimately what solutions can Denmark employ to boost its circularity going into the future. So what we've done is actually really study the material metabolism of the Danish economy from a macro level view. From that high level view, what we can see is a few key things emerging. One is a very high consumption footprint of around 25 tons per capita. The majority of that consumption is actually coming from imports, which even creates a higher material footprint. And what we see is that even as a small country, Denmark has a very high extraction of both biomass and minerals. We see also that a very large share of materials actually go into stock. Think of buildings, roads, and other infrastructure. So the materials that are coming into the economy are actually stored in the economy for multiple years. If I can, let's also break down what's behind the circularity metric. So Denmark is 4% circular. That refers to the socioeconomic cycling rate. That looks at the share of secondary materials over the total material consumption. What we also see is that there's a really high level of biomass consumption, about 27%. When we look also at fossil fuels and non-circular materials, that sits around 17%. What we also see is that there's a really high volume of materials that are contributing to stock, almost half, meaning that half of the materials that are being brought into the Danish economy are actually staying in the Danish economy as roads, building, and other forms of infrastructure. So what we see on the whole is that while Denmark has a very high consumption in total, and a low circularity metric, a lot of those materials are actually in the economy for the long term. If we also look at Denmark's performance relative to other countries, we can also see some key characteristics that stand out. As I said, Denmark has a consumption footprint per capita of around 25 tons. That's definitely higher than the global average of 12 tons per capita, but actually does compare to Switzerland and Poland at 14 tons and 19 tons respectively. What we see though is that Denmark has a really high import dependency. Over 70% of its consumption is coming from imports. This carries a much larger material footprint relative to Switzerland, which is 83%, and Poland, which is only about 46%. This has a direct effect on the circularity metric itself. So what we see is that the larger consumption of the Danish economy and the larger material footprint associated with imports equates to a lower circularity metric, the share of cycled materials over the total input, relative to Switzerland, which is 6.9, and Poland, which is over 10. In addition to calculating the circularity metric of Denmark, what we've also done is a jobs baseline analysis. What this really does is look across the Danish labor market and really look at what jobs are contributing to the circular economy as core activities, indirect activities, and enabling activities. What we found is that over 9.5% of jobs in Denmark are circular. A lot of this has to do with the direct activities of repair and remanufacturing, but also significantly more in terms of utilizing digital technologies, renewable energy, to create circular solutions. So where do we go from here? We know that Denmark is 4% circular, we know the number of circular jobs in Denmark, and we have a bit of an understanding of why Denmark is 4% circular. What we've also done is developed a set of 5 scenarios, really looking at all kinds of circular economy solutions across different sectors. These scenarios are what we call counterfactual scenarios. They investigate what if, and really give a sense of kind of what the future potential of circular economy could be in Denmark. So the first scenario we look at is constructing a circular built environment. The built environment having a huge carbon and material footprint. So this is also a really key area to intervene in the economy. Some of the key levers that we investigated here was actually increasing the renovation and making the most out of the building stock that already exists, while at the same time really prioritizing the use of secondary materials in new building construction projects. Imagine, for example, deep energy retrofits of housing or neighborhoods that both really prioritize energy efficiency, but then also in the material expenditure really consume a lot more secondary materials. The second scenario that we look at is embracing a more circular lifestyle, and that really has to do with individuals' consumption across household activities, thinking of clothing, furniture, household appliances. What we see is actually moving to more repair, remanufacturing, lifetime extension strategies. We could have a really significant reduction of both the material footprint and carbon footprint, while also boosting the circularity metric itself. The third scenario that we look at is mobility and really trying to rethink how we move around. What we rely mostly on is incentivizing car sharing, but mostly increasing human-powered transport and public transport. What we see here is that this, combined with other strategies like improving flexible work, working at home, could again reduce the material footprint and especially the carbon footprint quite substantially, while also boosting the circularity metric. We also look at the food system and how we can nurture more of a circular food system. We really combine two key strategies here. One is valorizing food waste, avoiding incineration, while also looking upstream to reduce the material footprint of the food system in the first place. Think of high-impact foods like meat and dairy. What we see is the combination of both of these strategies can actually help reduce the material footprint, especially the carbon footprint, but not necessarily the cycling metric, because biomass is captured under a separate flow that we don't capture in the circularity metric itself. Finally, we look at addressing the manufacturing system and moving towards more of a circular manufacturing system. Primarily, what we look at are strategies for enhancing and stretching the lifetime of machinery through repair, reuse, and remanufacturing strategies, but also looking at waste valorization, primarily through industrial symbiosis. What we see is a relatively modest impact, both in terms of material and carbon footprint reduction and the increase to the circularity metric. So let's zoom back out to that macro level. We've looked at the individual solutions and the individual scenarios, but actually what we see is by combining them, we can achieve even more synergistic effects. So at the level of the Danish economy, by taking all of these scenarios together, we could expect a material footprint reduction of 39%, a carbon footprint reduction of 42%, and the circularity metric could jump from 4 to 7.6%. Now, that's not an incredibly high jump, but I think considering the character of the Danish economy with a very high material footprint, it is actually quite a sizable result. I think what stands out particularly for me is the impact that circular economy could have on the carbon footprint. That's a really significant finding and also shows the power of circular economy when implemented across key systems like food, built environment, mobility, and household consumption. The impact of circular economy solutions are truly significant. The good news is that many of these examples and solutions already exist today. It really is a question of how we take it from pilot project and lab scale into broad practice. I really encourage you to all read the full report today at circularity-gap.world/Denmark and adopt circular economy principles now.